I mean, the amount of fear surrounding this thing is exactly what the elite wants you to do, willingly give your negative emotion into their ritual. They're getting you to do the dirty work for them, and every pun intended, because they need to harvest your low vibrational frequency field in on their ritual. And the more influencers that are out there talking, fear and ridiculousness that won't manifest, in my personal opinion, the more they get everybody on board with this fear-based thing. So the more afraid people versus 10 million or 100 million, their ritual on the outcome, however they're going to harvest these energies, I don't know. They're harvested, but what comes after that? What's the purpose? How do they utilize this vibration that they've captured? And I really believe it's captured. You're feeding the demon that we're trying to stop.
Yep.
We need to take our world back, and all the influencers are feeding the demon that's now being able to solidify a tighter grip on our planet. Stop it. Truly stop.
Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. We're starting a little early here today. Good to see you guys and any moderators and channel members out there. We have the creator of Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube. A warm welcome back to the show. Good friend of the show, David Dubine. I think it's important to talk about, and that is the solar eclipse. The solar ellipse, as the NASA representative calls it. Did you hear that? He called it the solar ellipse, not the eclipse.
That was probably hidden. That was a hidden meaning that they let go on purpose. Those kind of gaffes don't happen. That was a purposeful let out with that ellipse. Then, so how you read into it, whatever you want to read into it, but at those higher levels, those gaffes or those mistakes they're not mistakes. They're on purpose. Just trust me on that one.
Okay, well, I have the clip here that I'm going to play for us and let us lead us into the discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to watch that if you don't mind.
The solar ellipse.
He from the South, ain't he?
But a reminder that this is covered under fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. And that is what me and Dave here is going to be commenting on, is this NASA conference about the solar eclipse. Here it is. Let me get that banner up real quick. There we are. Okay, start it.
I've often said that at NASA, our mission is for all humanity, and that's because space brings us together. There's no better proof than moments like this, a total solar ellipse.
He said it, solar ellipse.
Yeah, you'd have to look back in the occultism of the ellipse, because he alluded also to somebody couldn't be there because of the Baltimore event there. So, there's a lot. They're reading. That was definitely messaging there, and you just have to connect the dots, because that's not normal for him. Like, he's so well spoken. Look how polished he is. I mean, he's a spokesman. And that it was so purposeful. Ellipse, He didn't try to correct after, it doesn't appear to be, but solar ellipse, and look into the occultism. Now, perhaps, Ryder, you would know better, because always talking with Wayne Steiger as well. Go into the occultism. Are you talking about Ouroboros or something? I mean, the ellipse is what's he getting at here? That was not a mistake. That's on purpose, what I'm seeing and reading right there. Body language, everything's spot on. He's a very elegant speaker and spot on speaker. That's why he's up at the podium. And notice how he doesn't flinch. Like, normally in a body language, you would make a mistake like that, you would flinch, like, oh shit, I made a mistake, But look at him, he just keeps going smoothly. Message delivered, on cue, on point.
Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Marjorie's free webinar provides you with the tools and knowledge that you need to thrive during these difficult times. You'll learn Marjorie's 3-part system for quickly producing vegetables, eggs, meat, and much more. Go to homegrown2030.com. That's homegrown2030.com, or click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video.
It's also interesting too, Dave, that whenever these NASA representatives they hardly ever say outer space. They only say space. He just said it. He just said space. He didn't say outer space. You know, and people take that whenever someone says space, they're automatically referring to outer space when there's so much more space. Anywhere could be more space. Because space could be inside of your head too, you know, like empty space in your room. Like space could be anything. Space could be the ocean. You know, it's just interesting how they say space, and the people that are watching and listening automatically assume that they're meaning outer space when they might not. Because you would think you would want to make that distinction, and they used to. NASA used to make that distinction, but now they don't. Hardly ever. They don't hardly ever say outer space anymore. They just say space. And I think that that's a very interesting observation. All right, let's continue here.
Well, that was a good catch. That didn't even cross my mind until you said that right there. You know, what about the hollow spaces beneath our planet? I mean, these giant cavern systems, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, the good call on the just saying space, not outer space.
Yeah, it's interesting. Play on words there.
When millions of people across North
Ellipse.
America will look to
Ellipse.
So let's look at the iconography there. If you can hold that slide for a second, notice the lightning bolt, which would be a plasma. For me, that's more of a plasma filament ripping off the sun there. You know, that top one, that's a plasma filament. And then if you go back, you got to look and see what the occult symbolism is for that kind of devil's forked tongue. That's exactly what I see there. It's a devil's forked tongue that looks like a plasma filament. And then that moon is definitely occultist there. That is, if you're looking at alchemy or some sort of earth worship, that's like the standard symbol for that, for the moon. You know, when you're looking at paganism and thing, that's paganism 101. Earth, moon, sun, sky. Right there you go.
It almost kind of looks like a serpent tongue.
Yeah, it is. That's what exactly right. Forked devil tongue. Yeah, serpent tongue. Exactly what. The forked tongue. So now start to put all these pieces together. They're giving the occult symbolism of an ellipse. So for me, an Ouroboros would be the serpent eating its own tail. And then we got obviously a serpent tongue here. And then you stamp that thing with the neo-paganism or some sort of occultism on top of that. Now here you're supposed to be able to see the devil's comet coming up perhaps with this thing as well. So for me, that's just 2 different points that are electrically arcing off. So there's a lot of strangeness with this. Just if you're looking at the heavens, it's just a bunch of strangeness. Now, what they're trying to get everybody to buy into with the fear in this occult ritual that's going to happen at the time. Now, don't delude you. It's an occult ritual happening here. Now, you have to willingly give your fear or your lower vibration energies. You have to willingly give that into the kitty, for a better term, into the pot. They can't take it from you. You have to give it to them. So by allowing all this fear to run around the event, okay, this is strange. It's interesting for me. I like watching solar activity, seeing solar events, checking out comets, these sort of things. Interesting for me, just as a general thing. Looking at the corona of the sun, I'm curious, what we're going to see when this thing, there will be no Nibiru spotted behind there at the thing. Now, that'll catch like 1 or 2% of the people. They'll be biting their fingernails. Nibiru's will be seen when the eclipse comes on. Man, if Nibiru is even close to here, all the planets would be out of their orbits by now. Really, like that's just a no-brainer. And for being in the inner solar system, oh my gosh, like none of us would even be in our own places right now. Like this planet would be tipped over if Nibiru was like in the inner solar system. Oh my gosh. Like the magnetism of another Jupiter inside the inner solar system. Are you kidding me? and I don't care if it's coming from the bottom up through the ecliptic, it would send our planets, all the planets would be out of their orbits by now. And that would be very noticeable. Like everybody would notice that the sun is in the wrong place setting at the wrong time of the day. And like everybody would notice it. So this whole, this, when it's occulted, the disk, and we're going to be able to see Nibiru at the time. I don't think so. I'm just going to say 99.9% on my edge. I don't think so. But there's always that sliver of a possibility, maybe. But what we see this Devil's Comet, forked comet coming off, that'd be pretty interesting too, to see the horns from the comet. Those are 2 electrical discharge points on it, by the way. Not a dirty snowball. So you're looking at double arcing on that discharge off the comet. And we'll see. We'll see. But the fear, it's a fear. And I'm glad you Ryder, that you talked to when we were having a conversation before the show. And I couldn't remember. I was like, man, there was this one other time where they were trying to get everybody super scared of something. And you brought it up to me then, It's that same kind of thing that we experienced before, isn't it?
It's exactly the same thing. It's that that emergency broadcast system that everybody was talking about that was going to turn everyone into zombies. It's the exact same thing. It's just a different kind of event, and it's another repeating thing. It's just like the Baltimore Bridge collapse with the ship going into it. You got the Evergreen ship. You got this solar eclipse that is happening, where people are doing all this fear mongering around, and all this stuff is going to happen, just like the emergency broadcast system. And it went and it passed and nothing happened. It's the same exact thing. And how often, we have solar eclipses every 18 months, right? They're between 2 and 5 solar eclipses every year, with a total solar eclipse taking place every 18 months. So it's like it's nothing new, and all the community gets in this hype about this stuff, and then it just becomes this fear-mongering thing because people, and it drives clicks, it drives clout in predictions, right? That's what the whole community is based off of, is predictions. Oh, this is going to happen at such and such date down the road, and then it comes, and then nothing ever happens. Everyone has always been wrong. They've never been right. So it's like it's another repeating fear-mongering thing. But I do want to finish up the rest of this gentleman, Bill, NASA representative, talking about this, because it's very interesting. It almost sounds identical to something that you would say, Dave. I think this guy listens to Adapt 2030, maybe. Whenever you hear it, you're going to be like, holy crap, did he just rip me off? Listen real quick.
This is in front and between the sun and the earth. And it's a rare sight that we haven't seen in 7 years. And unusual things start to happen as the normal rhythms of Earth are disrupted. When you're seeing this eclipse, you ought to observe this.
That was interesting right there. But see, people are clipping that section out of this talk, and they're turning it into something that it's not. And if you listen to the rest of the clip, but I've seen several people post just that section on like TikTok and like on Instagram, and using that as evidence of something that's going to happen during the eclipse. But if you listen to the rest of it, which we are right now,
well, let me interject there for a second. I've been through a full solar eclipse that lasted for 5 minutes when I was in China. This many years ago, and everything does get disrupted. Like the nighttime sounds turned on again. Like the crickets started, the frogs started again. Some birds in the morning time when they wake up and thing. So yeah, the rhythm was disrupted. It disrupted the rhythm of the animals and the insects. Of course it did. But I could tell you that just from being through the eclipse, a really long one. It was like 5 minutes and 13 seconds or so. It was like one of the longest ones that had been in over 100 years. And then here we are. This will be like 4 minutes and some. So it's a rather long one. A lot of them are 2 minutes, 3 minutes. This is actually a very long one, in retrospect compared to most others. So it'll be in the top like 15% of longest ones. But it'll disrupt, and you'll start to hear, if you're there, you'll hear nighttime sounds rock up immediately. It's just so strange how, it gets dark, and man, everything turns on instantly. Everything at night just comes on back on again. And then when the light comes back and then turn back to daytime sounds, it's actually amazing to watch nature flip from night to day and night in just minutes. Usually it takes, got to go through the sunset, and then everything will set in after that, and you'll finally get twilight, and it'll get dark, and then things will turn on. But this is like an instant turn on. So be very cognizant and pay very close attention to the sounds you hear of normally what you would consider nighttime sounds. I know we're not in the middle of summer, so it might not be as stark of a change, but just at least listen for the birds, how they change, stop, and a different type of bird will start chirping. It'll be interesting if you can notice those and be aware of these things, of like the sunset, sunrise, changing of the guard types of wildlife, how it's going to flip, boom, boom, in just a couple of minutes. Be cognizant of it, and once you know, and you'll be like, "Wow, that was crazy how they." But anyway, I digress. Sorry, Lane, go ahead.
That's exactly what he's getting ready to explain. So you already explained it for him. We don't even need to listen to it. No, I'm just joking. We got it here.
As the day appears to turn to dusk and then dark, people have heard birds stop singing. They've seen giraffes suddenly begin to gallop.
Really quickly, though, Dave, where in the United States can you see giraffes galloping?
Zoos.
Oh man, we need to go to the zoo to watch the eclipse, Dave, so we can see the.
Yeah, that'd be
giraffes
mad. I wonder what the
galloping.
monkeys would be doing there too. Like bunch of freaked out orangutans banging around in the exhibit area. Like what?
I thought that was hilarious. I was like, man, where in the United States are we going to see some wild giraffes galloping during the eclipse? It's just an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, that's
I thought
so
it was funny.
random, isn't it? Like, why would you think you'd like target it more toward a North American species? I don't know.
Roosters start crowing and crickets chirp. So watch for these unusual behaviors. And we encourage you to help NASA observe the sights and sounds around you. Eclipses have a special power.
I think you're right about that, Dave, because he said ellipse first in the beginning of his speech, and then he says the correct pronunciation of it here at the end. He just said eclipse.
But he said it had special power too. So there you go, right into the occultism. Now, again, he didn't tell you what kind of power. He just left it open. Well, if you're looking on the occult side of thing, like eclipses are like some of their high time. You know, you got to talk to Mark Carpenter. He's into the super deep into the ancient invasive hominid species of what we consider the world leaders today on the blood types and the bloodlines and this sort of thing of what has continued from this invasive destructive species, but they use these types of rituals. Now, I would encourage you also, if you're at an ancient site where there are ley lines, there's going to be rituals going on there too, because up through that whole area, the Mississippian culture, if you go back, say, before the collapse of most of that, circa 600 AD or so, like there's a lot of ancient sites. And a lot of these sites that are on ley line areas will be focal points for a lot of nasty during this time. But, I'd interviewed Mark a couple times, and he was explaining that they use this time to enhance the energies in the spots they're in. Now, can I get somebody's energy of emotion now into that also? So for me, the way he was explaining also on these very largest of events where the energies are going to be the highest to accomplish the goals of whatever during these rituals. It's not in a single location. It's spread out. And usually they're trying to do some sort of sacred geometry in the sites that the people all involved in the same ritual are having, because they're trying to spin the energy. You're thinking about the Hadron Collider, that what are they doing? They're taking the particles and they're spinning them to get them to go faster, and the faster they go, and eventually that momentum of the spin. So don't think of it as just a single ritual in one single place. Then that energy is moving and they're trying to get the swing around in it. So, think about going up to like Tikal, or I should say down from where we are, down at Tikal, or some of these places in the Mayan pyramid areas. They're not at just one single complex. They're at a complex 50 miles away. They're at a complex, half a mile away. And if they could line up these different complexes, let's say, like in Tikal, for example, there's 4 or 5 bigger, temples at the complexes there. They wouldn't use just one. There'd be ceremonies on all of the tops of all of those, circulating the energy around a wider spot. And this is the whole thing I'm looking at too. All right, well, they're not going to channel it up and down and make it go like this. What he did give away was it would have to be an ellipse if that energy were to be channeled. Because if you look at that, it would go down the right side and it would be a little bit and come back up again. And there would be some separation between, but it would be like an elongated ellipse. If they were to get all of the energies along these ley line sacred spots that were the Mississippian culture used to be, I bet this thing's going to run right near, the Serpent Mound as well. And it's going to be right all in that area, right? So you got to think about where we're looking at New Madrid fault zone. Not that it's going to go off. I'm just saying right near there, there's a huge amount of, that was the epicenter of, that was the center of the Mississippian cultures and the Cahokia and this sort of thing. So when you're coming up and down there, all these sacred sites from more of the ancients, plus you got Serpent Mound there. So think about running that energy from one place all the way down to Texas and back in this ritual of all the ancient spots on the ley lines at the same times during the ritual as it's passing. It wouldn't be a perfect circle like it would be in Tikal or other places like in Bagan in Myanmar, or some of these other spots where they're running the energies around in circles in the same complexes in the same areas, but in a wider berth. It would have to be an ellipse. He gave it away. Shoot, I can't believe that. I didn't even think about that until I was thinking about circulating energies. It would have to be an ellipse to circulate that energy around, because it wouldn't be a circle. Go figure.
Ellipse.
That's why I said it's going to be very different with these energy here.
Oh, and when you think of, well, it's going to happen on the 8th, right? What is the number 8? The number 8 is an infinity symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's just looping back.
Yeah, it'd be a tight 8, but a really elongated 8 coming back and forth, or it'd be a very elongated elliptical orbit of those energies swirling around as they try to accomplish their goals. Now, I'm curious, sometimes there's a map where you can put one point on the map and then you can look at the bottom of the globe and see where you'd pop out if you dug a hole, Like along this line, what's below that's on the other side of the planet where you could, because if it's such the big ritual and it seems like the occultists are at the apex of what they need to do, this would be like probably one of the biggest rituals in the last century, if not millennia. Like it seems like a lot of energies are lining up, especially with what I'm talking about, the 4 gas giants coming into their electromagnetic perturbation, strangeness, whatever that is going to be here in October of 2024. Now that's starting to line up and really solidify the energies. And all these other things, not that I think that CERN really can crack open the earth and everything, but there's definitely some magnetic resonance around that thing. And to be fired up at the same time is a little quirky. I know if you went through the earth from along the eclipse, each area that it went all the way through the United States, if you were to go on the other side of the planet and look to where those popped out, obviously it's not going to be over in Europe there where the Hadron Collider is, because that's only a third of the spin around the planet. So do a little research on that. Anybody out there, take a look at, are there any sacred spots that are connecting from beneath? Because you know what? It wouldn't be only where the moon is crossing on the eclipse. You could look to see on the bottom of the planet, because they would take that and try to take it right through the center of the planet as well. So think about that. It's like a sewing needle almost going from Texas all the way up through Canada as well. Now think about that sewing needle punching through to the other side of the planet on sacred spots. And I guarantee there'll be people there having ritual as well on the dark side of everything. Because imagine if you could take that sewing punch hole needle all the way through that whole segment of the planet
It's interesting with CERN as well, because I believe the last time CERN was turned on was in July 4th of 2022. And I remember that date because everyone again was talking about, oh, we're gonna switch timelines. We're gonna jump into an alternate timeline when CERN. See, I just did the whole thing. I just did the Bill thing. I just called it a turn instead of CERN. But they were talking about, oh, well, we're going to jump into an alternate timeline and all this stuff, an alternate reality when CERN turns on July 4th of 2022. So, I mean, nothing happened. So I highly suspect nothing is going to happen with this one as well. But let's finish up this this video here, because I want to get into a little bit more of the occult aspects of this as well, because there's something really interesting that NASA is doing around this solar eclipse that we're going to get into after this video is over.
They move people to feel a kind of reverence for the beauty of our universe. Their power is not only to unify us on Earth, but to further science and discovery. In 1919, Albert Einstein's theory of gravitational bending was proven when scientists measured how stars shift when the sun is blocked out by the moon. And today, over a century later, a total solar eclipse still brings great opportunity in science.
So he was talking about the unification of people during this this solar eclipse, or how he says it, solar ellipse. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of this as well. He's talking about the unification of people.
Depending on the frequency you're putting out. And it's all about frequency and holding state. Because I was watching this interview from a guy who was living in Bali in the 1970s, you know, before Jerry Lopez and all these guys got down there. And right when that hardcore surf group kicked up in Uluwatu and stuff in the 70s. But they were interviewing him, and he's like, yeah, you know, the locals here who are having their rituals at their temples kept the vibration in check, and the whole area kept that vibrational frequency based on what those people were doing at the temples for their ceremonies also, of keeping that vibration at a certain level. And he was saying, you know, the same thing, that they were doing these types of ceremonies at all the temples on the same days, and the vibrational frequency across the island would remain in the same. And he said he could still feel it today, but it's not at the level that it used to be. And he's like, this place is timeless because they still keep these ceremonies going on. Now, if he's, you know, directly correlating that to something where he's saying that they're doing ceremony across the island to bring the vibrational frequency and harmony again, and that's what, including the people, then what is this thing going to do if they're going to try to take the fear-based frequency or the lower vibrational frequencies and connect and tap all those together? It's truly the same thing, but just on a different level of frequency.
So there's another lady that pops up in this NASA conference and follows up on what Bill was talking about with the scientific exploration of the total solar eclipse happening on the 8th. And this is what she says.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Korick, and I am the NASA Eclipse Program Manager, excited to discuss the ways NASA is using the solar eclipse for scientific discovery. In addition to our over 20 satellites in NASA's Heliophysics System Observatory that regularly observe the sun, we'll be using rockets, planes, and balloons, and on-the-ground observations to optimize the science return of the eclipse.
Rockets, planes, and balloons, Dave. They're going to be shooting rockets into the eclipse on the 8th. NASA is launching 3 rockets into the solar eclipse next week. 3 rockets, and they're going to shoot it into the eclipse to study it for scientific.
I don't think that's
purposes.
possible. I just don't think you can't launch it into the eclipse. The eclipse is the result of the moon passing in front of the sun. So how do you launch anything into the eclipse? That makes no sense to me.
Well, they're saying that they're going to launch it into the shadow, the direct shadow of the eclipse. The headline is a little misleading. It says they're going to launch it into the solar eclipse, not really into it, but into the shadow of the solar eclipse to study the effects upon Earth. And I'm like, what is more American than shooting rockets into the eclipse, baby? Says here, ultraviolet radiation from the sun routinely pries away electrons from the atoms, forming abundant electricity charged particles that puff up the upper atmosphere. It thins out upon sunset, and these ions recombine the neutral atoms, only to be ripped apart again next dawn. If you think that
Are they talking about atmosphere expanding or contracting during this time?
That is part of the study, is to study the atmosphere with these rockets that they're shooting into it. The sudden transition from day to night is known to cause sharp drops in temperatures and even trick animals into engaging in nighttime behaviors. But the scientists understand little about how brief moments of darkness influence the boundary between Earth's upper and lower atmosphere, called the ionosphere, which extends 55
That's the electrical boundary.
But I thought that was I thought it was funny at first.
I don't know. A lot of weirdness around this. They were never concerned about this before, and it's the first time they're launching rockets up there to try to understand the boundary layer there and see what the millivolt charge changes during an eclipse. Is this the first time they've ever thought of that? And I mean, well, you told me something. I forgot the name of the rockets. I know one of them was Ra, as in the Egyptian god Ra. What were the other two names of the rockets?
I would have to, let me see if they say it in this article, but they're all named after gods, just like all of NASA's programs have always been named after gods. So it's nothing really new. They've always done that. Apollo, Gemini, all of their test flights and a lot of their projects have all been named after gods since the inception of NASA. So let me try and find the other ones. I knew that one of them was named Ra, yeah.
Yeah, because putting the rockets up there, are they trying to obscure something with the vapor trails there? Because from our ground view, shooting a vapor trail up there during that time is going to be very much like a contrail, like in a persistent contrail. Once it gets up in that, you're going to watch that thing like layer out, so they're going to block the view for a few people.
Well, and then also, if something strange could be seen, they could just be blamed on NASA rockets.
Just interesting how this bombing of the Iranian embassy ties up with this at the same time. So, like, walk through me with the mind experiment here. Like before this event, when we were talking, Ryder and myself here, this bombing of the Iranian embassy had not occurred yet. So keep in mind, this ritual here, this is a destructive energy ritual, Kali, and the energy of destruction in this ritual for the elitists, that's what it's all about. Trying to harvest this, create fear. And again, what will they do with all this energy that's willingly given to them from humanity? And how wide of an area can they encompass and use this energy? But before this Iranian thing, it was just over the eclipse area that was this like energy harvesting / occultist ritual area. But now imagine if the war kicks off in the exact same time or days, that adds to that fear or like negative vibration that's baked into this ritual. But then you would have to look triangulating it then. If we go from where we, let's say, like the New Madrid fault zone, we use that, boom, as the center dot there, Missouri, right at the end of Missouri, you get that little boot heel there. Right there, we'll use that as the center point of, say, the American event, and then we'll swing way over into the Middle Eastern event, and we'll mark it right there at Israel. But then there would have to be a third triangulation point somewhere over here in Asia also. And I bet they'd be pretty damn equidistant between themselves as well. So then you'd have to look where the third point is and what, again, the triangulation, because if you're going to try to punch hole sacred spots through the planet and match them up on the other side and do rituals coming through the planet to harvest energy, then would it not make sense to encompass it around the planet equidistant and have it rotating around the planet? It's almost like it's rotating in three on XYZ axis on this thing, where you're going under the planet itself, like literally through the middle of the planet on a plane. Then you have the ellipse that would be, that either the figure 8 or the fully ellipse itself on the surface, which would be another axis plane. And then if it were to be a third point on the other side of the globe, then they would have the full spinning from, what you consider like an orbit around the planet. Let's say the equator, for example, is a good, or 60 degrees north or 40 degrees north. They would just spin around the planet at there. So you'd have that crossing through the planet, the ellipse on surface, north and south, and then the running of the circle around that 60 degree, 40 degree north latitude thing going on. So if you're going to try to do some sort of ritual and pull energies at the time, you got the XYZ axis going on. I just need to find that third point over in Asia where they might try to tick something off to cause more fear.
I can't find the names of the rockets, but this is from NASA's official website. NASA to launch sounding rockets in the moon's shadow during solar eclipse. NASA will launch 3 sounding rockets during the total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024 to study how the Earth's upper atmosphere is affected when sunlight momentarily dims over the portion of the planet. They're going to be launched from Virginia. The sounding rockets will launch at 3 different times, 45 minutes before, during, and 45 minutes after the peak local eclipse. These intervals are important to collect data on how the sun's sudden disappearance affects the ionosphere, creating disturbances that have had the potential to interfere with our communications. No.
At least that's a better headline. That sums it up way better than there's like the generic CNN one. They're going to shoot it into the eclipse. Now, personally, a couple of things from my end. I do not think there's going to be a giant 8.0 earthquake on the New Madrid fault zone. That's a shadow. It's a shadow. Now, maybe some random either events would cause something a year or two later, and I know if there is, people will go, "Oh, it was the eclipse. It's been exactly 718 days because the 7 minus the 1 is 6 plus the 8, or something like this, or the 7 plus the 1 is 8, and then 8, and then add those two together is 16, and it's a 7. See, I knew because they'll do something like this, like 2 years after the event, to try to connect it back where there's no connection. And then there's supposed to be, I don't know, I heard some crazy stuff about the eclipse. This is what I don't get. It's like you're allowed to run on social media and blare out any ridiculousness and not any culpability there. Nobody holds your feet to the fire after the event, and nothing comes to fruition.
Yep.
Right? But it's all about the fear. Notice the fear that surrounds this one. It's almost like these influencers are in on the ritual. Not everybody. I'm just saying some that are pushing the fear super hard. Like, why is this fear being pushed so hard into this thing? And it's XYZ, they're going to spray spray some kind of Marburg, bird flu, something from planes. There's emergencies. Interestingly, though, Indiana just declared a state of emergency because of all the people coming into the eclipse. And because they did, and somewhere else, there's 2 or 3 other places have done that, already declared states of emergency, that they're going to say, see, they're planning to call out the National Guard and lock everybody down in those same minutes of the eclipse. I mean, the amount of fear surrounding this thing is exactly what the elite wants you to do, willingly give your negative emotion into their ritual. They're getting you to do the dirty work for them, and every pun intended, because they need to harvest your low vibrational frequency field in on their ritual. And the more influencers that are out there talking, fear and ridiculousness that won't manifest, in my personal opinion, the more they get everybody on board with this fear-based thing. So the more afraid people versus 10 million or 100 million, their ritual on the outcome, however they're going to harvest these energies, I don't know. They're harvested, but what comes after that? What's the purpose? How do they utilize this vibration that they've captured? And I really believe it's captured. Now, you know, and then everybody's even then there's more influencers and more news and more this and more that. And it's just like, I don't know, this fear needs to stop around this event here of all this conjecture of, like we talked about, the 5G towers are going to go off and turn everybody into a zombie type of thing. That just needs to cease. You're feeding the demon that we're trying to stop.
Yep.
We need to take our world back, and all the influencers are feeding the demon that's now being able to solidify a tighter grip on our planet. Stop it. Truly stop.
That is perfect, and I agree 100%. They blow all of these events out of proportion. They get on there and they just talk about a bunch of nonsense and get everybody wrapped up in things that no one should be worrying about in the first place. But it drives clicks, it drives people to their channel, and all the while it's really covering up the things that we actually need to be worrying about. And just for people that think that this is a rare eclipse, it's not. Every 18 months, there are between 2 and 5 solar eclipses each year, with a total eclipse taking place every 18 months or so. Total solar eclipses are seen every 400 years from any one place on the surface of the Earth. This is not a rare event. It happens all the time. It might not happen all the time in the United States, but for somewhere in the world, there's a solar eclipse happening.
You can find the forecast for those too. They show you every single one for the whole year. Every one, even the lunar eclipses.
Dave, whenever someone makes these exaggerated predictions about stuff like this, then no one ever comments on it after it doesn't happen. They never call them out. They're never like, oh, well, you know, it's just on to the next thing. They just shuffle on to the next thing. It's like the Lionsgate thing that happens every year in August. All the spiritual community and the New Agers all talking about, oh, it's the Lionsgate portal that's opening. Like, did you guys not just remember last year? They were saying the exact same thing. They said it only happens once in a lifetime. They just said that same thing last year and the year before and the year before that. It's the same thing every year.
But it grabs your attention, doesn't it?
Thanks for being here, Dave. Thanks, everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you. All the links to Dave's information will be in the description of this video. How's it going, Lost in Space? Mike, Rick, good to see you. Lynn, No Bull Truth, Gray Arena, good to see you guys. Thanks for being here, everyone. Scotty Boy, Nance.
Oh wait,
Marissa.
what's the name? Larry, Moe, and Curly were the name of the Rockets.
Yeah. Scotty Boy.
That's so true, isn't it?
Yeah.